The man behind the message, he wasn't just the author of Think and Grow Rich. He was a seeker, a spiritual warrior, who discovered power in the unseen. The year was 1928. America stood at the edge of a cliff about to plunge into the most catastrophic economic collapse in modern history. And the man who understood more about wealth than anyone alive couldn't afford to pay his own rent. His name, Napoleon Hill. His mission, to uncover the invisible laws that govern success. But what most people don't know is that the man behind the message was quietly unraveling. Behind the books, behind the lectures, behind the powerful quotes that would echo through generations, there was a real man, buried in debt, haunted by fear, strangled by a silent anxiety that robbed him of sleep and hope. And it was exactly in that moment, when he questioned everything, even himself, that something extraordinary happened. If you do not conquer self, you will be conquered by self. Napoleon Hill, one cold, empty night, alone in a rented room. Hill fell to his knees. He wasn't religious. He followed no particular doctrine. But in that moment, he surrendered. And instead of looking outward for answers, he turned inward. That's when he discovered the first tool. Spiritual tool number 1. The invisible counsel. Hill only shared this with a few close confidants. Even when he finally revealed it in his book, few took it seriously. But this was the most powerful tool he ever used. I sat down and invited higher minds to advise me. Napoleon Hill on his invisible counsel. For months, he followed a secret ritual. Every night, at the exact same time, he'd close his eyes, breathe deeply, and picture a round table. At that table, he invited men like Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Edison, Andrew Carnegie, even Jesus Christ. In his mind, he would speak to each one. He'd ask questions. He'd listen. He'd take notes. It was as if he had tapped into an invisible field of wisdom, a higher intelligence, and the answers he received carried a kind of power that shaped his actions the next day. At first, it was just imagination, but after a while, I began hearing things I could have never thought of on my own. Napoleon Hill, most people laughed. Some called him crazy. The breakthrough begins, but here's what's truly curious. The moment he started this nightly ritual, everything changed. His writing became clear, his decisions sharper. Ideas flowed, the right people showed up, and deep within, a quiet spiritual confidence began to rise. Hill understood something most people never grasp. The invisible world always responds when you approach it with humility, clarity of intent, and unshakable faith. But this was just the beginning, because even with the invisible counsel guiding his steps, fear still chased him. That old ghost of doubt, that creeping sense of not being enough, the whisper in the dark, "You're nobody. This will never work." And it was in that battlefield, not in the world outside, but in the terrain of his own mind, that Napoleon Hill discovered his second spiritual tool. But that ... you'll learn in the next part. For now, hold on to this. The first key to winning in the outer world is to build invisible relationships with the eternal. Imagination, when guided by faith, is the bridge between who you are and who you're meant to become. The greatest enemy of man lives within him. Napoleon Hill, the following year, arrived with promises and with even greater trials. Hill had already tapped into his invisible counsel. He had felt, if only for fleeting moments, the presence of a higher intelligence directing his path. But it didn't stop him from falling. The bills kept piling up. The phone kept ringing with demands he couldn't meet. And his wife, Florence, was starting to lose faith in this impossible dream, the dream of her husband becoming a successful writer. "You need to be more realistic," she told him. "Maybe it's time to give up these experiments and find a steady job." Hill said nothing. But inside, a storm was growing. The invisible blow, when the mind becomes its own prison. One night, after an argument with Florence, Hill walked out into the streets. No direction, no destination. Just one thought echoing in his mind. What if I'm completely wrong? He walked for hours, until he found himself sitting alone on a park bench, exhausted, broken, in silence. And it was there, in the stillness of that cold, lonely night, that the second tool was born. Not as a thought, not as a concept, but as a cry from within, a breakthrough, a release. Spiritual tool number 2, the conscious replacement of thought. Every negative thought you entertain is a prayer for failure. Napoleon Hill. Sitting alone on that park bench, Napoleon Hill came face to face with a truth that would forever change his mind. He was the one allowing certain thoughts to take root. Up until that moment, he had tried to not think negatively, tried to resist fear, to avoid the darkness. But that night, he saw the deeper secret. The key wasn't to fight thoughts, it was to replace them. Every time fear crept in, he would speak words of power. Every time doubt whispered, he'd respond with conscious affirmations. Every time his mind painted pictures of defeat, he'd plant visions of victory instead. And right there, under a sky void of stars, he crafted one of the most powerful affirmations of his life. I am guided by a higher intelligence. I am on a sacred mission. Nothing can stop me, because the power within me is greater than any obstacle. Hill repeated those words, over and over again, hundreds of times, until the tears came, until his chest felt warm, until something inside him clicked into place. That's when he realized, faith isn't something you're born with. It's built, brick by brick, word by word, repetition by repetition. In the days that followed, this became his secret weapon. He wrote affirmations on his mirror, spoke them out loud during his walks. He trained himself to instantly challenge every negative thought and replace it with a positive opposite. It looked simple, even childish. But make no mistake, this was sacred work, inner reconstruction. And day by day, thought by thought, his mind slowly shifted from a battlefield to a temple. But there was still one final piece missing, because even with his invisible counsel and the power of conscious replacement, Hill still found himself drifting. Moments of strength, followed by deep collapses. What was missing was alignment, a deeper link between his inner beliefs and his outer actions. And it was only when he withdrew into the solitude of the mountains, a silent retreat that lasted for weeks, that the third and final tool revealed itself. A tool that had nothing to do with thinking, imagining, or repeating words. It was about acting in faith before any results appeared. But that ... you'll discover in the next part. Spiritual tool number 3, inspired action without guarantees. Faith is the bridge between the invisible and the inevitable. Napoleon Hill, after that long silent night on the park bench, Napoleon Hill returned home changed. With his invisible counsel and the power of spoken affirmations, he had realigned his inner world. His mind was clearer, his faith reignited. But the results still hadn't arrived, and that quiet, corrosive frustration began to creep back in. That's when Andrew Carnegie, the man who had first planted the mission within him, the man who had dared Hill to uncover the laws of success, called him in for a final, decisive conversation. It was a cold morning in New York. Carnegie greeted him kindly, but with eyes like steel. "Hill," he said, "you already know what you need to know. But you're still not willing to pay the price that real faith demands." Hill's brow furrowed. Carnegie continued, "You're waiting for a sign before you act. But life doesn't work that way. The decision is the sign." Then he stood, walked to the window, and said, "You must begin acting as if you're already successful, even when there's no evidence. Faith only becomes strong when it's tested." That hit hard. Right then, Hill realized the truth. He had been waiting. Waiting for security before taking the leap. Waiting for the money to show up. Waiting for the fear to go away. Waiting for anyone to validate him. But Carnegie looked him straight in the eyes and delivered a challenge that would echo for the rest of his life. Go to the bottom of the well and jump with no net. If your faith is real, the universe will give you wings. And that's exactly what Hill did. With no money, no guarantees, and no idea what tomorrow would bring, he locked himself away in a mountain cabin, alone. He took with him just a notebook, a pen, and a suitcase of clothes. And for 30 days, he acted like a best-selling author. He walked the room, repeating affirmations out loud. He meditated before writing. He consulted his invisible counsel before every chapter. He wrote with urgency, with presence, with reverence. But above all, he acted every single day as if success had already been decided. It didn't matter that the book wasn't published yet. It didn't matter that no one knew his name. It didn't matter that he had less than $1 to his name. I no longer wait to believe, he said. I act and the world rearranges itself around my conviction. That was the third and final spiritual tool. To act with faith before the evidence appears. Not reckless action. Not desperate movement, but inspired action. Rooted in stillness. Fueled by vision. Anchored in the invisible. As if you've already seen the future, and now you're simply walking toward it. The inner shift before the world follows. In the months that followed, Hill completed the manuscript of the Law of Success. When he returned to the city, he carried just one single copy, hand-bound by himself, to present to a small group of entrepreneurs. One of them was so moved that he decided to fund the first printing. Another introduced Hill to a prominent publisher. And when the book was finally released, everything started to align. Not magically, but with a kind of spiritual logic. Because by then, Napoleon Hill had already become the man he had spent so long visualizing. He wasn't just writing about success. He was the living proof. The 3 spiritual tools were complete. 1. The invisible counsel. Connection to higher wisdom. 2. Conscious. Thought substitution. Inner mastery. 3. Inspired action without guarantees. Real-world manifestation. And that's when Napoleon Hill's visible journey truly began. But what the world never saw was everything that had to shift within him long before it could reflect around him. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. Imagine it, the silence of a mountain at dawn, the cold wind brushing against your face, a man in a worn-out suit, seated on a simple wooden chair, pen in hand, eyes closed, breathing deeply, calling forth, one by one, the members of his invisible council: Lincoln, Edison, Darwin, Christ, Carnegie. Napoleon Hill wasn't praying. He was aligning. That's how he began each day. Not in fear, not in haste, but in presence, in purpose, in power. Because he had learned one of the most sacred and brutal laws of life. The outer world is always the last to change. True transformation begins within. And once it begins, it becomes inevitable. He had built a temple in the place of his old battlefield. He had replaced fear with clarity. He had shifted from waiting to creating. And that shift, that sacred internal shift, was what turned his vision into reality. That's what turned thoughts into things. That's what turned a man with nothing into one of the most influential minds in the history of success. The modern ritual of inner mastery today, maybe you don't have time to sit on a mountaintop. Maybe you don't even have a quiet corner in your home to meditate. Your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. Your phone buzzes before you even open your eyes. Traffic is madness. Deadlines press in from every side. But the principle remains the same. Either you create an inner sanctuary of wisdom and guidance, or you will be crushed by the urgency of the world. Napoleon Hill didn't invent the invisible counsel as a mental trick. He created that ritual because he understood one thing. Human beings are emotional magnets. And without a spiritual source of direction, we become nothing more than an echo of our surroundings. Today, that echo shows up as addictions, anxiety, comparison, imposter syndrome, chronic doubt. But there's a way out, a way to rise above the noise. It begins by creating your own table of masters. Build your own council and consult it every single day. Modern practice of tool number 1. You don't need to see ghosts. You don't need to have visions. All you need is a clear intention and active imagination. Start simple. Take out a piece of paper and a pen. Write down the names of 5 to 7 people who embody the wisdom, courage, or brilliance you want to awaken within yourself. It can be Jesus, Gandhi, Einstein, Socrates, Buddha, Tony Robbins, your grandmother. What matters is what these figures represent to you. Then, every morning, before opening your apps, before checking messages, before the world comes rushing in, sit down for 3 quiet minutes. Breathe deeply. Close your eyes. And imagine yourself sitting at that sacred table. Ask questions. Wait for the answers to rise from within. Let yourself feel guided. In the beginning, it might feel strange. You might think you're just making it up. But with time, you'll begin to notice something deeper. A presence, a knowing, a silent strength. You'll realize something greater is listening, and it's been answering you all along. When Hill finally mastered the art of consciously replacing his thoughts, he stopped fighting fear. He no longer tried to silence the voice of scarcity. He began to tame that voice, like one would tame a wild horse. Because here's the brutal truth. Negative thought is stubborn. And if you don't carry a sharpened spiritual weapon, it wins. It dominates you. It hijacks your choices. It whispers doubt into every step you take. That's why Hill didn't just repeat affirmations like a robot. He declared them with heart, with body, with soul. I am guided by a higher intelligence. I am the master of my destiny. I act with courage, even in the face of the invisible. These weren't just words. They were spiritual codes, commands, seeds planted in the fertile ground of emotion and watered daily with the energy of belief. Modern practice of tool number 2. Now it's your turn. Craft 3 affirmations, but not generic ones. They must be 1. Short 2. Direct 3. Powerful 4. Emotionally charged examples. I am the creator of my life. I act with courage. I am guided by something greater. But here's the secret. It's not enough to repeat them. You have to feel them like they are already absolutely true. Say them out loud. Say them in the mirror. Say them in your car. Say them while you walk. And most of all, say them when you're afraid. Say them when everything seems lost. That's when the universe listens loudest. Because that's when your faith is being tested. Not when everything is easy, but when your world feels like it's falling apart. And you still choose to speak life. That's when the invisible begins to move. That's when the path clears. That's when the help comes. That's when the mountains bend. Because the energy you send out in faith has the power to rewrite your future. After finishing his book, Hill spent months not knowing if anyone would ever publish it. He woke up early every morning, dressed in his best suit, and stepped out the door like he was already a successful author. No appointments, no guaranteed destination. He knocked on strangers' doors, shared his vision, offered to speak for free, handed out typed chapters tied neatly with a ribbon. And do you know what happened? Reality began to shift. Because the universe, contrary to what many believe, doesn't respond to words. It responds to vibration, to intention, to action. Modern practice of tool number 3. Pick one simple action that your future self would take. Start acting as if you're already living that reality. 1. Want to be an author? Write every day. Publish small pieces. 2. Want to be a speaker? Record videos, even if no one watches. 3. Want to prosper? Organize your life like someone who's already financially clear. Don't wait for the circumstances to change. Be the change in the circumstances. What Hill learned, and what the greatest masters of all time echo, is both simple and brutal. You don't conquer success first, and then change internally. You change internally, and success inevitably follows. But here's a blind spot. What do you do when, despite all that, chaos creeps back in? How do you hold on to peace when the world seems to be falling apart again? Circumstances don't shape a man. They only reveal him. Everything seemed to be falling into place. The book was gaining traction. Speaking engagements multiplied. Napoleon Hill's name was starting to echo among entrepreneurs and dreamers. But, as with any true spiritual journey, the test came, and it came hard. The invisible crisis in 1929, when the economic crash hit the U.S., Hill lost nearly everything. Book sales plummeted. Events got canceled. Scarcity knocked at his door like an old ghost. But this time, wielding an axe, his house was nearly foreclosed. Debts piled up. His emotional health quietly began to crumble. And it was then that Hill admitted, I started doubting myself. I began to believe that maybe it was all just luck. Hill began speaking his affirmations even through tears, even buried in debt, even with no clue what tomorrow might bring. The human mind, when aligned with faith, is the most powerful force in the universe. He would say aloud, not to impress anyone, but to remind himself, to reprogram, to rewrite his story. Here lies a secret most people overlook. Words aren't magic. They are memory. And repetition restores to the spirit what pain tries to erase. How you can do the same. In your darkest moments, you have two choices. 1. Remain loyal to fear. 2. Stay loyal to the truth that hasn't yet shown itself. Hill's spiritual practice was simple. Fake it with faith, until it became real with power. Wake up and speak your affirmations with steady voice, even when your mind screams otherwise. Sit down with your invisible mentors and ask for guidance, even if it feels silly. Act with symbolic courage. Take micro actions that represent the future you want. Spiritual life is a muscle. And like any muscle, it grows stronger under resistance. The invisible turnaround. Shortly after returning to his rituals, Napoleon Hill got an unexpected call. An invitation to speak in New York. Nothing grandiose, but enough to light up his eyes again. That small action sparked another, which sparked another, and soon he found himself with a new publisher, a new opportunity, and more than that, a new version of himself. He realized the true meaning of success wasn't money, wasn't prestige, wasn't recognition. It was the ability to hold peace, faith, and presence, even in the darkest moments. Planting this reality in you. You don't have to wait to lose everything to practice what Hill practiced. You don't have to hit rock bottom to start climbing. For months, he retreated, isolated himself, stopped writing, stopped teaching. And right there, at that exact crossroads in the journey, most stories end, but not his. When the invisible counsel saved his mind, one sleepless morning, Hill found himself staring at his reflection. Unshaven, eyes hollow like empty wells, a heart drained of hope. He had been swallowed whole by the very fear he'd spent a lifetime battling. But then, he remembered the invisible counsel. He remembered the sacred circle he himself had created. It was time to practice what he preached. Time to stop looking outward and turn deep within. He closed his eyes, took a steadying breath, and imagined sitting at the table with Lincoln, Edison, and Christ. He didn't ask for answers. He didn't ask for fortune. He didn't ask for a miracle. He simply whispered, "Help me remember who I really am." The inner gold, The answer came not as a voice from above, but as a fierce clarity deep inside. A reunion of the soul, like a long-lost flame reigniting inside his chest. Like Hill had stepped out of the shadows of victimhood ... and reclaimed his power as the author of his own story. That very day, he grabbed pen and paper and began to write, not for publishers, not for the critics, but for himself. It was in that darkest season that the most profound, most spiritual passages of his work were born. The true power of affirmations. A shield against doubt. When life is smooth, it's easy to say, I am prosperous. I am guided. I am capable. But the real magic of affirmations doesn't thrive in comfort. It is forged in the fires of struggle. All you really need is a daily space to reconnect within words that feed your soul and shield your mind small. Symbolic actions that declare to the universe, I still believe, even without results, even without proof, even with fear. Hill fell, but he came back, and he came back stronger, because he understood that real success doesn't come from desperate struggle. It comes from inner alchemy, from the ability to turn fear into faith, scarcity into intention, and chaos into clarity. And in the next part, we'll see how he used all of this to impact millions ... and how you can apply it in your own projects and life mission. When you serve a higher purpose, the entire universe conspires in your favor. The comeback few knew the battles he had faced. Even fewer understood what he had discovered. After nearly giving up everything, Napoleon Hill returned to the stage. But something was different now. He no longer spoke only of goals. He no longer spoke just about ambition. He spoke of alignment, of mission, of spirit. It's not enough to want to win. You need to understand why you want to win. Success without purpose is just an empty golden shell. This new chapter was marked by something powerful. Hill began teaching the invisible, not just what to do, ... but who to become. When success comes from the invisible, during his talks, he would say, there's a bridge between your inner world and the results you see out there. That bridge is called spiritual intention. And this wasn't some cheap mysticism. It was practical observation. He noticed a hidden pattern in the lives of dozens of millionaires. They all had a purpose bigger than their ego. They all cultivated a ritual to reconnect with themselves. They all believed in something greater than themselves, whether God, fate, or an inner force. Hill understood that wealth without spiritual presence breeds anxiety. But when you act on behalf of something greater, peace doesn't just come after the victory. It walks with you every step of the way. A mindset that heals. During this time, Hill deepened one of his greatest legacies, the idea that everything begins in the mind, but doesn't end there. The mind is the channel, but faith is the power. He started saying that you can use the mind as a tool for healing. Healing doubt, and healing insecurity, and healing scarcity. But to do this, you must raise the standard of your thinking. To stop chronic self-sabotage. Stop feeding ideas that contradict your soul. And how do you do that? With daily spiritual practice. Small actions that reprogram your subconscious. 3 pillars of transformation. Napoleon Hill, without naming them exactly, lived by a tripod that aligned success with spirituality. 1. Conscious visualization with real emotion. He didn't just mentally picture his goals. He felt them as real. He breathed as if he had already won. He gave thanks as if it had already come to him. 2. Affirmations with intention and presence. It wasn't repeating cold phrases like a robot. It was declaring with purpose. Everything my spirit desires already belongs to me in the unseen realm. 3. The invisible counsel as a nightly ritual before sleep. He'd enter silence. Connect with wisdom archetypes. Ask questions. The mind dreamed answers. The spirit woke up with ideas. These 3 pillars, emotion, word, and inner listening, formed the foundation of what he later called the spiritual engine of success. The real impact of this, from that transformation, Hill returned to writing, but now with a different energy. It was during this time that he prepared the expanded version of Think and Grow Rich, with chapters diving deeper into faith, persistence, and emotional transmutation. Businessmen started coming to him not just to make more money, but to live better. And he told everyone, money is just one form of manifestation. True prosperity is peace of mind, plus contribution, plus inner coherence. That phrase, in fact, became a mantra, and it changed thousands of lives. How this reflects in you. Maybe you've read Napoleon Hill before, or maybe this is your first time hearing about him. But what really matters is, can you see yourself in this story? Have you ever had days when you believed, but then doubted? Have you ever wondered if the universe really responds? Have you ever felt there is something inside you waiting to awaken, but that you need a sign? This story is your sign. Because what Hill discovered, you can apply too. You don't need to wait for chaos. You can start in the silence of today. How to practice this now 5-minute morning ritual. Before touching your phone, declare, today, I connect with the intelligence that guides me. I act with clarity, receive with gratitude, and expand with purpose. 2. Invisible counsel at night. Close your eyes. Imagine 3 mentors who inspire you. Ask yourself, what do I need to remember about who I am? Sleep with this question. 3. Visualization with real emotion. For 3 minutes, imagine something you want, but feel it. Breathe as if you're already living it. Enter this state as if it's real, because energetically, it already is. Napoleon Hill didn't change the world because he wrote a book. He changed it because he embodied a truth, a vibration, a state of mind. And that state is available to you right now, here, in this very moment. When you master the invisible, the visible bows before you. You've come this far, heard about the struggles, the failures, the dark nights of the soul, witnessed Napoleon Hill's silent pain, and saw how he weathered the storm, was spiritually reborn, and created a legacy that still transforms lives decades after his death. But now, it's time for practical truth. Time to reveal the 3 spiritual tools Napoleon Hill used daily. Tools anyone, including you, can apply, starting today. But first, take a deep breath. Relax your shoulders. Feel the weight lifting off your back, because what comes next is not just a teaching. It's an invitation from your soul to your highest self. Tool 1. Thought replacement with emotion. Hill said, the mind does not accept emptiness. A thought can only be expelled if another, stronger one, takes its place. This tool is simple, yet profound. Whenever a negative thought arises, fear, doubt, rejection, scarcity, you must not fight it directly, because struggling with a thought is the same as feeding it. Instead, replace it. Hill did this with heightened emotion. He wrote and spoke phrases like, I am guided by a divine intelligence. Nothing can stop me, for all things cooperate with my purpose. But he felt those words. He declared them with his whole body, eyes closed, breath engaged. How to apply. 1. Choose a phrase that lifts you up. 2. When a negative thought arises, pause. 3. Inhale deeply, close your eyes, and declare the new phrase with emotion. 4. Repeat until you feel the energetic shift. Do this for 21 days, and you reprogram the foundation of your mind. Tool 2. The Invisible Counsel. This was, for many, Hill's most esoteric practice, but for him, it was one of the most sacred. Every night before sleep, I sit with the greatest sages in history. I close my eyes, and let them speak to me. He called it the Invisible Counsel. Here's how it worked. Hill chose 9 historical figures he admired. He visualized a meeting room where each had their seat. He asked specific questions to the group. Often, he woke up with brilliant ideas, solutions, and revelations. It might sound crazy, but hundreds of CEOs and artists over the years adopted this practice with impressive results. Because the truth is, the subconscious mind creates reality. And when you connect with archetypes of wisdom, you access a field beyond the rational. How to apply. 1. Choose 3 mentors, living or dead, that you deeply admire. 2. Before sleeping, close your eyes and visualize them in front of you. 3. Ask a clear question. What do I need to know to unlock my next phase? 4. Silence. Receive. 5. The next day, write down any idea, image, or feeling. Repeat for 7 nights. Watch how your intuition begins to speak louder. Tool 3. Purpose. As a living prayer, Hill discovered that without a greater purpose, success was like a leaky bucket. You achieve, but nothing satisfies. You win, but you don't feel at home. That's why he treated his purpose like a living prayer. Something he repeated every day. Something that guided him in tough decisions. Something that gave meaning to pain and waiting. My purpose is to inspire millions to believe they can win. That faith and work walk hand in hand. That the mind is a portal and the spirit is the fuel. This was more than a phrase. It was his anchor. He recommended everyone have their own spiritual mission statement. How to apply. 1. Write a phrase that unites your gifts, your values, and the impact you want to create. Example. My purpose is to illuminate paths, heal with words, and prosper by being myself. 2. Repeat this phrase out loud every morning. 3. Whenever you feel lost, return to it. It will be your compass. These are the 3 tools. 1. Replacement with real emotion. 2. The nighttime invisible counsel. 3. Purpose as a living prayer. Simple? Yes, but powerful enough to transform an entire life. Because it was with these practices that Napoleon Hill rebuilt what he had lost and created an eternal legacy. You don't need to apply everything at once, but you do need to take the first step. You're not here by accident. There's something in you that wants to expand, something that knows life has more to offer, and that true success is born from within. Napoleon Hill was a messenger. But now, the next chapter of this story is written by you. The mind creates. The spirit sustains. Action transforms. So ask yourself, which of these tools will I apply today? The answer will show you the way.